If Trump wins the election, how do you see the crypto markets reacting?
The initial activity will be super euphoric. We'll see sky high prices, all time highs across all parts of the asset class. And then I think there will, at some point, I don't think it will be a day one agenda item, but at some point, there will start to be fine tuning around different parts of the crypto space.
It's Wednesday, September 25th, and this is Markets Daily, hosted by me, Jen Sanasi. Today's episode is sponsored by Stand with Crypto Alliance. On this show, as you know, we navigate the currents shaping the crypto markets, providing insights against the broader financial landscape. So, whether you're actively trading or just fascinated by the volatility and craziness that is the crypto markets, this show is your compass to understanding what's happened, where we are, and where we're going. Good morning, everyone. Joining us on today's show is ProChain Capital President David Tawil. David, welcome.
Thank you, Jen. Good to be with you.
Of course, good to have you here. I start every show by asking our guests what you have been watching lately. What's been sticking out to you?
I think macro controls most price movement right now. Certainly, there are idiosyncratic stories either in equity markets or in crypto markets, but largely we're talking about the Fed. We're talking about what's going on in China. We're talking about the upcoming presidential election. And those are really things I think that are going to move markets most over the next couple of months.
Let's start with the presidential election, and we can get into some of those other macro events a little later on in the show. One of my recent guests, 10x founder Marcus Thielen, said he thinks that the election is not really going to move markets. It's not as big of a deal as folks are making it out to be. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions there.
I think it is a big deal. I think in Trump, everybody knows, everybody in the crypto community knows that he will generally let the sector run and will not hold it back in any way from a regulatory perspective, chilling the market. And he may even go ahead and be supportive, right? In unique ways, such as, buying some food at Pupkey. But with Harris, I think it's totally opaque. And the only folks on the crypto side that seem to have the Harris administration's ear are Anthony Scaramucci, which has a history with Trump, and so therefore, has aligned himself with Vice President Harris, and Mark Cuban, who has a much larger agenda far beyond crypto. And the only thing that we've heard out of Harris thus far with respect to crypto is, I'm going to quote it so that listeners hear exactly the amorphous statement that people are hanging their hats on. Quote, "We will encourage innovative technologies like AI and digital assets while protecting our consumers and investors." That is something that I think we could also hear out of Gary Gensler, who has not been a particular fan or supportive force behind crypto. And so I think in Harris, there's a big question mark. And I think it is unlikely that she will be very supportive of crypto, be very daring when it comes to policies, and may very well go ahead and drag Gary Gensler into another presidential administration. So as you can see, I am certainly focused on the presidential election. I do think that there is a lot riding on it.
The quote you read there is definitely a vague statement. I think it's a statement that we could hear out of anyone's mouth, just given how vague it is. Just curious, we look at what Trump has said about crypto. We look at maybe what Harris has not said about crypto. Does any of this actually matter heading up to the election? And I ask you that because there's a lot more that goes into getting clear legislation that may then move markets than, just what a sitting president thinks of crypto.
Absolutely. But I think that an agenda set by the president and by regulatory agencies, particularly in this case, the SEC and the CFTC, to the extent that they could get on the same page and be a united force behind legislation, will go ahead and get the Congress to move forward. But you're right. We also have to see what happens in congressional elections that are coming up as well. And then to speak to a broader point, frankly, which is it does matter because crypto businesses are thinking very hard about whether they really can, for the long term, thrive in the United States or whether they really need to look to a foreign jurisdiction in order to go ahead and set their agendas and go ahead and have a considerable amount of success and support in order to go ahead and accomplish those agendas.
I want to take a look into the crystal ball for a second here. Of course, we only know what the candidates have said or not said ahead of the election. Anything could happen and their policies could go in any direction once they are in office. If Trump wins the election, how do you see the crypto markets reacting?
Oh, euphoric, no doubt. I think it'll be. I think the initial activity will be super euphoric. We'll see sky high prices, all time highs across all parts of the asset class. And then I think there will, at some point, I don't think it will be a day one agenda item, but at some point, there will start to be fine tuning around different parts of the crypto space, whether that be layer ones, whether that be memes, whether that be DeFi, exactly how we're going to go ahead or how the administration, along with Congress, is going to go ahead and map the agenda and get things accomplished. I am scared that in the case, to anticipate your next question, in the case of a Harris election, this certainly will not be a day one issue. Secondly, we will have more of the same in terms of regulatory strategy, which is to go ahead and sue or to use regulatory actions to go ahead and try to confine the sector, and that will further chill any sort of development, any sort of investment, and there will constantly, and this was a theme in today's hearing before the House Financial Services Committee, the concern that the agenda strings are being pulled by other people, a la Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, just for folks who are watching or listening, we are recording this on Tuesday, which is when the House Financial Committee is happening. We're talking about the SEC hearing. We'll dig into that in just a moment. But I want to ask you directly, if Harris does win, how do you think the markets react in that case?
At best, flat. At worst, down a lot, potentially. Because, her statement about protecting customers and investors is really amorphous, because protecting customers or doing what's best for those two constituents could very well not to give them access to these products because they have been rife with fraud, and we've seen the bankruptcies of FTX and Celsius. I mean, those are the types of things that the legislators like to go ahead and harp on. And so, might as well go ahead and avoid the pitfalls. Yes, we're giving up an enormous amount of upside, potentially, right? And I think that that's where the Republicans really diverge harshly with the Democrats on this, or Gensler versus Peirce. The upside, yes, there is going to be downside risk. And yes, certainly the first wave of downside was going to be calamitous. As with any technology, the first wave of, destruction is going to be calamitous. But you've got to learn from those things and appreciate the fact that the technology is revolutionary, and we've got to go ahead and, put more emphasis on how much value could be spread to the American public, as opposed to worrying so much about how much fraud there might be or how much theft there might be, and criminal activity.
I want to point to a few different instances. I had Congressman Ro Khanna on this show who was really talking about a different way forward from through a democratic lens when it comes to democratic leadership. He was very crypto forward, as I think everyone knows who follows politics. He is very crypto forward. He was encouraging Harris to learn more about crypto, to sign up on Coinbase, get a wallet, learn more. So that she can better lead in this area if she were to become president. We've spoken to the folks from Crypto for Harris, who are folks who operate in the industry, who believe that she could do good for the industry. And we've heard from leaders who have said on X that the Harris campaign has reached out. They're trying to better understand. What do you make of these different I guess pinpoints that I've just told you? Do you think that there is some desire there from the Democrats and from the Harris camp to learn and to maybe take a different stance on the party has taken in the past?
I don't know if it's genuine until there's something concrete said, and more importantly, actions speak a lot louder than words. I really am suspect of it all. And I think, this talks to a broader point about Harris's campaign having been mum or being mum on a lot of issues. And it's working. Don't get me wrong, right? I mean, her poll numbers are good and her money raising is off the charts. And so if that strategy leads to victory, then all the power to her. But as someone who is, primarily concerned from, a financial and investment standpoint, certainly for purposes of my investors in my fund, about, making gains on crypto, it's really important for me to know that there is a very, it doesn't need to be crystal clear, but certainly a general motivation and a general strategy of moving forward with the industry as opposed to, stonewalling everything or attacking everything.
Tell me a little bit more about that. Why do you think it's not genuine?
Um, because Harris has been in the White House now for 4 years. I mean, I don't mean for this to devolve into a political discussion, but she's had the opportunity. These are not first time issues for her. She may be speaking as, her own commodity at this point, but frankly, I don't think that she's diverged so much with Biden that we can go ahead and assume that she's got a whole different platform of priorities. She may know very clearly that illegal immigration has been a losing issue. And so therefore she may need to definitely pivot. I don't think there's anybody on the Democratic side that will say to her, go ahead and stick to the same policy as the Biden Harris administration on immigration. But everything else, I don't think that there are a lot of Democrats, especially Democrats in power, certainly Democrats in power in Congress and donors, that are going to go ahead and say to her, the only way to victory is to go ahead and pivot on these issues. And look, in the hearing today, I mean, you had those very hardliners continue to go ahead and toe the line about the theft, the fraud that is rife in the crypto industry. And we've got to go ahead and make sure that it is not a criminal enterprise, which it certainly, can be, or, according to them, has been.
Hey everyone, did you know 52 million Americans own cryptocurrencies? That's not just a number, it's a movement, economic, social, and political. Decentralized finance, blockchain, and digital currencies are more than buzzwords, they are the future. This November, it's on us to show up and step up. We need to protect crypto to ensure it continues to fuel innovation and freedom for our families and businesses. Don't let this opportunity slip by. The future of crypto is on the line. Make your voice heard this November and pledge to vote now at standwithcrypto.org/pledge. You mentioned your investors just a few moments ago. What kind of questions are they asking? Are they asking anything surprising to you about what might happen after the election?
Nothing particularly surprising to me. I think, as someone who has been in the industry for 10 years now and who expects to be in the industry for at least another 2 decades, the question the real question becomes is show me the use cases, right? Because the use cases, I think, will blow the policy concerns to bits. We're seeing a lot of tokenization of financial assets, so I think that that's good. And it seems that, you know, I'm not particularly perturbed by the fact that the behemoths of traditional finance are leading the charge when it comes to tokenization of financial assets. It is what it is. The fact that it's not an upstart that's winning here. I mean, Securitize is doing really well, and they're an upstart. So the fact that the likes of BlackRock and others that have recently kind of followed in BlackRock's footsteps are leading the charge. I think that from my perspective, from a policy perspective, that's fine with me. But we need to see more use cases, and that's what my investors want to know. What are the more use cases, and when are we going to see them, and how are we going to see the revenue flow? So if the DMV in California goes ahead and tokenizes 42 million driver's licenses, well, what does that mean? How do we make more money out of that? How do we anticipate the next trade? And is there really money to be made out of tokenizing IDs, or no? Do we have to wait for something more valuable, more transactable? An ID or a driver's license is not transferred between parties ever, but property title is, or insurance policies are, and so maybe we need to go ahead and wait for that. So those are the things that are top of mind for myself and my investors.
Well, tell me more about that example you just said. What does that mean if licenses and IDs are getting tokenized? And how should investors be looking at use cases like that when they're looking at how they might want to allocate a portfolio or what they might want to invest in?
So tokenizing personal records, I believe, um, is it does two things. First of all, there's some of the most important or critical records, right, from a security standpoint. If organizations, if government organizations, and if individuals or those that the IDs or records are being issued to are getting comfortable with the tokenization, that is great, because that goes ahead. You're taking one of the hardest pieces of data and information to go ahead and tokenize from a security perspective or concerns, risk around security. You're getting that done first. Everything else should be able to follow from there, being that it is less high risk than that. The second thing is that it's greasing the wheels of the entire system. People are getting comfortable with the fact that something is being tokenized in their life. And then lastly, and then maybe most importantly from an investor perspective, is how much is the state of California going to go ahead and save by doing this, right? I don't know if we yet have the data out about, and it's too short of a period of time, but in terms of going ahead, making IDs, making them, in terms of renewals, in terms of people coming in, spending time in DMV, proving themselves, who they are, pieces of, validating information, so on and so forth. Is there over time going to be a major cost savings to the state of California? If the answer to that is yes, and this is for non-transactional documentation, we're talking about transactional documentation that usually involves lots of middlemen like lawyers and title insurance people and bankers and other types of very highly paid white collar middlemen that facilitate these transactions. Taking those folks out of transactions could be incredibly valuable to systems. And the question is, how fast can it be adopted? Who are if the state of California is okay with they control all the DMVs in their state. They don't control all the property records. Property records are county by county, municipality by municipality. And so therefore, can they go ahead and impress on municipalities to go ahead and record property records through tokenized effort? Anyway, those are some of my thoughts in terms of how things go, but I expect that things will go ahead and pick up speed, and we'll start to see. And as an investor in particular, blockchains, I have to constantly be concerned about, well, on what blockchain are they tokenizing? Are they using Ethereum? Are they using Solana? Are they using another? Those are very important, questions.
What blockchain stands out to you? What blockchain do you hear and you think, yep, that makes total sense and I'm going to invest in this project or I'm going to keep watching it?
Oh, for me, first mover is very important. It's really hard, at least in my opinion and in my experience, going ahead and dethroning the first mover and the protocol that's so far ahead in terms of users and transactional activity, even taking into account a faster, cheaper blockchain, is very, very hard. So it's always important to think about, on the one hand, the best mousetrap, i.e., the cheapest, fastest. On the other hand, though, critical mass, it's very hard to change human, you know, the human regularity of just having used a particular blockchain and saying, is it really worth it to go ahead and try to move? So for me, I know this is going to be a boring answer, but for me, the tops by total value locked are really important.
I kind of knew you were going to say that. But it makes total
Sorry.
sense, David. It makes total sense.
I'm
Uh,
not I'm not a founder, right? I'm not a founder. If I was a founder, I'd be able to talk the merits of a really whiz bang idea. But I'm an investor and I've got to go where the most likely appreciation of value is. And that's just the way it is historically.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, before we go, I want to ask you, just from an investor perspective, if you were to choose uh, three assets, three projects, or three sectors, or a mix of them all that you're really watching and excited about as we head into the end of the year, what would they be?
Okay, it's a loaded question. I have to give some disclaimers. So, in addition to being the president of ProChain Capital, I'm also the CEO of a publicly traded entity that's listed in Canada, has a dual listing in the United States. Current name is Centaurus Energy. We've announced that we have exited the oil and gas business. We have a royalty stream, a passive royalty stream that comes to us, and we are investing all of our capital into Ether and other layer ones as we are legally allowed to, and staking those layer ones. So I have a vested interest in Ether. Um, to my earlier point about total value lock, first mover status, things along those lines. But again, that company, it will be renamed from Centaurus Energy to Layer One Inc., continue to trade in Canada and in the United States. And the expectation is that we will invest in multiple layer ones. Layer one for me is interesting because there is no other layer one public vehicle other than Bitcoin, MicroStrategy, and others that have copied MicroStrategy's strategy now. And I think that the market deserves, and certainly in the United States, where ETFs cannot stake their layer ones or their Ether, and maybe one day if a Solana ETF is approved and Avalanche and so on. So we are able to go ahead and do that, and we think it's really going to be a valuable proposition to investors. So that's my one area of focus. Other area of focus, there's nobody in crypto who there are people in crypto, but I think they're fools for not focusing on Bitcoin. Bitcoin always needs to be focused on. It is by far the first mover status, by far a very interesting narrative. Will it take over the digital gold? Although today it seems to be very correlated with risk markets in terms of equities, especially in the wake of the Fed's decision to go ahead and cut 50 basis points. Bitcoin's prominence, growth, morphing of storyline, I think, will be a huge issue for a very long time to come, which is incredible. And then lastly, generally, DeFi is incredibly interesting to me simply because I come from a traditional financial background, and I'm so interested to see how DeFi will go ahead and evolve. Right now, it has limited utility in terms of just being a lending and borrowing, platform essentially, for cryptocurrencies. But DeFi really should be growing into other areas as well. And I'm hopeful that with a better presidential administration and a better policy platform, we'll start to go ahead and see the innovation of DeFi in the United States.
David, thank you so much for joining Markets Daily today. It was such a pleasure. I know we got cut short. We have to have you back on the show next time. We'll talk about some of those other macro factors. But for now, thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. And thank you to our audience for listening. If you enjoy listening to Markets Daily and all of the other podcasts available on CoinDesk, subscribe to the CoinDesk Podcast Network, available on all podcast platforms. Subscribe to our YouTube. Give us a thumbs up. Leave us a comment. Thank you so much for listening and watching to today's show.